staff members who do programming, I mean. So, for now, although there certainly are other men around, which is, I mean, for a while, it really was true that I was the only man. And then James came along and John came along, so that was great. And now, so now there's. All right, good deal. So, all right, so let's get started. So I think what we'll do, I don't know why this of all things is here, but it is. All right, hold on a second. I think what I'm going to do is I will in fact share.
Okay. Well, let me move. That's okay.
We're still figuring all this stuff out here, I tell you. It's
Tiny bit. No.
Mexico City here.
Yeah, no, you're talking about that.
Okay, then if Marjorie moves over, then Diana can move over.
Using the,
Thank you. It's good.
what about you? Could you look at?
No, because.
you've got a bad angle. But yeah, we'll just have to put up with it.
That's fine.
All right, luckily actually we'll do it this way. Luckily there's, you know, we can easily just talk things through.
Thank you. I wish you take off this one.
You shouldn't.
Well,
Fauci said we should wear it inside.
Everybody, all the people works here should wear it.
Yeah, now staff has been informed that we are
Even
supposed
in
to,
the kid, in the.
we're supposed to wear
upstairs in the
masks,
skylight,
but-
people gotta wear it.
All right.
All right.
I will say,
I will.
well, that new variant is very highly contagious.
right, exactly,
What?
exactly.
And
Yeah.
those of us that have been vaccinated can actually carry the new
Oh, yeah, we
variant.
heard
We could test positive for it.
Yes,
Get
that's
sick
true.
from it.
we're starting
No,
over
people
again.
are-
It never stopped.
people are getting
Anybody
sick
can
from
get
it,
sick
but
from
they're
it.
not
Yeah.
as serious as it used to
Hopefully
be.
we wouldn't get deadly sick.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that we don't really have to worry about getting deadly sick, but you know, you never want to play around with things like this. So feel free if it feels like the right thing to be masked. I think it's completely fine if that's what you prefer. And you can also not be masked. That's also completely fine. All right, good deal. So we've got. All right.
Try the microphone so they can be better heard.
Boy, I don't know if I can, I don't know if I don't, this is the microphone for Zoom. I don't know that I can add another
Can you hear
piece
me
of
now?
equipment. But I will speak loudly and we will, if you have trouble hearing me, please let me know. Raise your hand and say, Jim, I can't hear you, in which case I will either yell louder or I will try the microphone. Although the microphone is, I find the microphone in this room is very unreliable for me because I can never tell the difference between me just talking and talking through the microphone, so I have no idea how loud the microphone is.
Yeah.
So, let's.
Yesterday, just for the record, I was using the hand mic and people told me that the sound was just as bad.
Yes,
with the hand mic as without it.
right. The,
Except
you
of
know,
course, they had waited until I read 5 pages.
exactly, until you've said you said your entire piece. All right, great. So today we are going to pick up with, there's a part of this chapter that I skipped that didn't seem to be, I think, of particular interest to this group. I hope I'm not wrong. And then I'm moving to another piece which I hope is interesting, and it's about prayers that we might say upon coming in and out of the Beit Midrash, in the house of study. I was thinking it might make it easier for people to see.
Yeah, it does.
And then it also has a couple of deathbed scenes. The Talmud loves deathbed scenes, And because what is the most important thing that people have to say in their lives?
Shema.
Obviously, the last thing they offer. And so the great rabbis, when they die, there's an expectation that the blessing that they bestow upon their followers will be of great import and great utility for us. So I hope that I hope that's true. I hope it's true. We'll see. All right. So in the Mishnah, Rabbi Nehunya ben Hakana haya mitpalel bich nisato levet hamidrash uvitziato tefillah ktsara. All right. So in addition, okay, so never mind about whatever. Rabbi Nehunya ben Hakana would recite a brief prayer upon his entrance into the study hall and upon his exit. All right, so very important. And this gets, I think, to something that's very important about Judaism in general, right? Is that our tradition really focuses on those transitional moments, right? Those moments when we're entering into something or when we're leaving something, right? So when we enter Shabbat, what do?
Eat.
Well, of course we eat, right? We have a feast, right? And part of that, right? Part of the feast is we light candles,
And we
right?
pray.
We light candles, we say a prayer, we make kiddush, right? Over the wine.
Mhm.
We have a special, we're supposed to say motzi before every meal, right? But we make a particular big deal of hamotzi on Shabbat, right? Because we're entering into this different space, right? This different sort of way of being on Shabbat, right? And then we do the same thing when we leave Shabbat. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Does that mean you have to eat bread? Is it only bread, really bread, or food?
Right. So hamotzi, right, refers to bread, right? So remember that when the Talmud and our traditions were made, no one knew about celiac disease, right? No one understood, right, how important it was for people to have the option to go gluten-free. There were not whole aisles in the ancient supermarket devoted to gluten-free products. I was in Wegmans yesterday, actually, and I was overwhelmed because in the cracker section, there's a whole series of shelves devoted to gluten-free crackers. And then there's a whole aisle devoted to gluten-free products that include crackers. I'm like, my gosh, if you need gluten-free crackers, there's places all over the supermarket you can get them. Even 10 years ago, right? That wasn't the case. So certainly way back when, that wasn't the case. So yes, I mean, the assumption is, right, just like the assumption back then is that you would drink wine, right? So the idea that someone might have a problem drinking wine, right, was, not necessarily considered. Yeah, go ahead, Maury.
I don't want to divert too far, but it seems everything's so connected in many ways. I like their introduction. How we're supposed to have, what our place is when we start something new or do something that we apparently never might do. But we recognize the beginning of something. But I like the question. But it went off a little bit in my mind to just what's the thread of the announcement, in abstract. So I like the fact that there's some sort of a connection and a prayer that covers that.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily covered or not covered in a bigger picture, but in this what we view as a small question of entering into study hall.
Right. Well,
I like the idea that this particular rabbi found it within his vision of things and understanding that his prayer announced similarly something of what was referred to in another case.
right. So there's, obviously all these the various sorts of things are connected, right? There is a sort of a general rule, right? Pay attention to the beginnings and ends of things, right? Pay attention to transitions, right? And we do, by and large, most cultures do, right? I was just reading something somewhere, I don't remember where, right, about the fact that that most cultures, especially pre-modern traditional cultures, have some form of coming of age ritual, right? Some sort of, usually involving some sort of an ordeal. When a child becomes an adult, right? There's some sort of ritualized ordeal in the Jewish tradition. We call it the bar or bat mitzvah, right? Where we torture children for 13 years, and then Oh, I'm joking about that. All right, but
But it is.
but there is, and it's actually interesting. I was, in the congregation that I lead in Cambridge, right? We have an unusual custom as regards the bar bat mitzvah, which is that the kid not only reads from the Torah and does the Haftarah and does a little Devar Torah, right? A little teaching, right? It is then followed up by a grilling session where everybody in the congregation can ask the bar bat mitzvah kid questions, right? And it's very interesting to talk to parents, some of whom are very worried about their darling little child being, abused by these Harvard professors who are going to ask them impossible questions. And it's very interesting because my experience of it has been, right, that the kids, even if they're a little intimidated, right, they love it. And they recognize in themselves, right, this capacity to sort of stand up in front of a crowd and field questions. And to understand if they don't know the answer, what they say in that situations, I don't know.
That's a smart thing.
It's really, and it's amazing how the kids just sort of glow after. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
But it's not really for girls, it's just for boys.
Well, these days it's for girls as well. Ever since Mordecai Kaplan, back in the 40s, decided that his daughter was going to have a bat mitzvah, just like I don't know if he had sons, but just like the boys would have a bar mitzvah. So yes, I mean there's a lot of gender inequality, right, that we have inherited, and we are still working our way through it, right? We're still trying to figure out how to manage it, right? And there's this is true of every traditional every traditional religious system, right? Needs to deal with the fact that by and large, human societies tended to be patriarchal than matriarchal for many years. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
All I wanted to say is a vote of assurance and support to the mental capacity of women are equal to any other human being.
Well, not only that, they tend to grow up faster and to be a lot smarter than the boys, at least in high school. So it's
The only requirement that I see is different is that's superimposed on a male in terms of religious ritual function, but that doesn't necessarily mean that can't be partaken of in the multiple ways or creative ways that they have their lives. And it doesn't diminish the intellectual ability of women. I just don't think that it's very well enunciated, very well emphasized up until recent times.
I think that's true.
That the contribution of women is there.
right. Oh, and you definitely see it in the Talmud, but you see it in far and few between, as opposed to the default, right? The default is that the people named and quoted in the Talmud are men. And so it's exceptional when it's a woman, right? These days, if we were to have a Talmud of the Jewish people today, right, it would be much more egalitarian. Right. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, the infamous Larry Summers once said that women were inferior to men. He got booted out of the presidency.
Well, he should.
That's right.
You silly man.
What did you show down?
Larry Summers.
He said that they couldn't do, I think he said women couldn't do economics or math or science or something ridiculous, but
How come their children?
You're right. They said the women's going to do nothing. They should just get the jobs that they would be good at. Oh, right.
He did all right.
It was succeeded by Drew Gilpin.
right.
He did great.
All right, so let's move it away from, I know that this topic is forever interesting, but let's move it away from this one. All right, so they said to him, wait a second, why do you need to say a prayer? Why do you say a prayer? So I mean, the tradition, right, as we see in this translation, talks about, well, why do you need to say a prayer when you enter the study hall, right? Because it's not dangerous to go into the study hall. Although anyone who was with us for the previous sugya remembers, right? What does Rabban Gamliel call the study hall? And the people who are there are the Balei Tarasin, right? The masters of the swords, right? So it is a little dangerous. God forbid I say something wrong and I get my head cut off from it. Obviously, it's a metaphorically cut off, but still, you don't want to make a. So he says, no. He said, so what room is there for this prayer? Why do you need this prayer? He said, well, when I go in, right, I pray that no mishap will transpire, right? That I won't make a mistake and mess things up, right? And if it's me, of course, I hope that I won't trip over something and knock over all the books, right? But and upon my exit, I give thanks for my portion, right? I pray that I do okay when I enter, right? That I will contribute, and then that when I leave, right, I'm giving a prayer of thanks that I was able to be part of this.
One question, quick question.
Yeah.
How would you define the difference between a statement of that sort and just a ritual acceptance that can be adapted or adopted over time because of an individual who brought forth such a prayer, because it could be in everybody's brain to do that.
Right. I mean, it's actually, I think it's really interesting, right, that in the Mishnah, right, in the Mishnah, the question, we're reporting, right, the Mishnah is sort of a kind of a mythical telling of the formation of the Beit Midrash, right? How are we supposed to behave, right? So this rabbi is Nehunya, right, is being told the point of your prayer, right? So it's like an origin story, right? So why do we pray? Who knows? Do we really need to pray when we go into the Beit Midrash? But yes, you're right. So this sort of sets the tone, right, for Jews who are serious about study, right? And it's not just rabbis, right? This is what's sort of interesting about this. On one hand, this is all about rabbis, right? On the other hand, who behaves like these rabbis? Any Jew who studies, any Jew who learns Talmud, right, is basically acting like these rabbis. Go ahead, Naomi.
Would there be not a mezuzah at the entrance to the Beit Midrash? Because when you enter and leave your house,
Yes.
touch the mezuzah. and
Right.
say a little prayer.
Right.
So how, why is this prayer different from all other
Right,
prayers?
right, exactly. All right, so that's a great question, and it raises again the issue of, okay, well, when were these various practices instituted, right? When did we actually start having a physical Beit Midrash that was separate from other structures, right? As opposed to the Beit Knesset, right? The synagogue where we would gather, right? Or just people's homes, right? And what if at first, right, the Beit Midrash was actually someone's home, and so you would, if there already were mezuzahs on, I don't have that history in my head. Like when did the mezuzahs get put? No, it's a great question, right? When did we start putting mezuzahs on our doorposts, right? When did that actually start happening as a regular practice, right? And what's the difference between this and just kissing the mezuzah when you go in, right? All great questions. I wish I had better answers. Go ahead, Jyoti.
I was just gonna say, I like the fact that there's a bracha for every occasion.
Right.
Like seeing the moon, the first
Yeah.
moon, the new moon, the half moon,
Yeah.
this moon, seeing flowers, seeing
Yeah.
a star. And it's not said by rabbis, and it's not said in the synagogue. It makes it more sort of pantheistic or whatever.
I mean, that, right, and you're pointing out, and again, you're sort of underscoring, right, that this kind of Judaism, right, that these sort of cultural heroes, these rabbis, right, they're really exemplars for all Jews, right? They're not exemplars just for people who call themselves rabbis or who went through some sort of school program and have a little piece of paper that says, oh yeah, you're a rabbi, right? No, this is really for everybody, right? And again, remember that I think it's important to remember, right, that the Mishnah and the Talmud are talking about a sort of an idealized notion of the Beit Midrash, right? This is not history, right? This is a kind of an attempt to put together a kind of idealized study hall, right? But this is the kind of Jewish world we wish we had, right? Or that we wish we could point to as being something that was in history, right? And that actually this is what we're building for ourselves now. So yeah, go ahead, Fran.
So, when I meet Thursday mornings with my rabbi study group at Sinai, there's a blessing that we say before Torah, but it's not always strictly Torah. It could be literature, it could be customs.
Right.
It's really a basic midrash.
Right.
So how does that prayer with say,
Right.
bless us and bless you, God, as we begin the study of Torah?
Right.
So
That's right. So I love that you're bringing this up because it reminds me, right, that when we read from the Torah scroll, when we read from the Torah scroll, we have a certain Torah blessing that we say, right, in a synagogue service, right? We have a Torah blessing. There's also the blessing that we say when we're going to learn Torah, right? Which, and I don't know if that's what Rabbi Vogel uses or if he has a variation on it that he's made up.
It's right out of.
Right. So, that one, and which we have not been saying here, but, we probably should, right? Which is Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, the regular old blessing formula, right? Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, right? Who has given us the mitzvahs and sanctified our lives that way. Vitzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, right? That we should immerse ourselves in the words of Torah.
So this is more, general, no, more specific.
This is more specific, I think, right? This prayer, the prayer that we're about to read, right, is the prayer that when we enter into a place, right? And I think that's really important to think about because in Judaism, right, and Jeannie just said this, right? One of the amazing things about Judaism is it's so much not space dependent, right? Judaism is wherever you are, you're able to do Judaism, right? So we used to have, right, and to a certain extent we kind of have now, but it's a little weird, right? We don't have a central shrine in Judaism, right? The central shrine of Judaism, the temple in Jerusalem, is no longer there, right? What's there now is a central shrine of Islam, right? Although the real center of Islam is not in Jerusalem, right? It's in Mecca, right? And that's where people go once a year, once in a lifetime. Every Muslim, right, is supposed to go and make that Hajj, right? That pilgrimage, right? There is no equivalent place currently for Jews, right? It hasn't been for 2,000 plus years, right? Which is why we have all of these alternative spaces, all these alternative avenues to find holiness, right? So that Judaism can happen wherever we are. And there's this sort of extra holy place called the Beit Midrash, right? Which again is any place where there's Jewish books, basically. Anywhere where we go, where we're going to learn Torah, Talmud, Jewish literature, Jewish law, whatever it is we're going to learn, right? That is the Beit Midrash. Go ahead, Jeannie.
So that's the whole, in order to be in the holiest place, you have to have the books.
Right.
You have to have the law. So that's sort of a disappointment for people who like the sort of modernist, Buddhist, universal tendency now to praise the creation and nature and lack of dogma, whether everything that is holy. I think Thomas Merton said, and feeling that being out in nature feels like.
Right. Well, there's no contradiction there.
But I don't understand because you said this is ideal.
It is an ideal.
You
It is.
have to have the books in order to be at the.
No, I don't think it's an ideal, right? The focus on the traditions, right, which is and that's actually a really interesting tension that you're raising, right, is that in the absence of a space, in absence of a holy place, right, we have our tradition, we have our books, we have our texts, right? Jews love texts, We love words, right? And so sometimes Jews get annoyed, like, enough with the words already. Let me go out into the woods and pray, right? Let me go out into nature, right? Let me go to stunning vistas, right? And climb mountains, right? Or go into the middle of the woods, and find, and there's no contradiction, right? There's no contradiction there. It's just that in the absence of a central shrine in Judaism, right? We've built up this sort of mythical idea of a place where we study. Go ahead, Maury, and then Phyllis.
I'm trying to capsulize this by saying that what is all that's being expressed that we carry with us, there's a certain centrality of prayer and thought. So wherever you go as a person, as a Jewish person, you carry a centrality of your knowledge and what you need to pray about and what you should pray about in your own vision of things according to the rabbis. And it's all, as far as I'm concerned, a matter of centrality in the brain, of what you want to carry, and it's all good.
Yeah.
And if you want to just put it that way, if your brain can accommodate the possibilities outside, inside, anywhere,
Right.
over time and place, the centrality of the brain and your person carries it.
Right. I mean, but I also think it's the other thing that's important about Judaism, which, and I don't know about non-Western Buddhism, right? The Americanized version of Buddhism tends to be very, very individualistic, right? And I don't know enough about Buddhism to know, like, are people in Buddhist countries as individualist as the average meditator? I don't know. But the other thing that, the thing that we've left out, right, is the importance of community, right? Of being together with other people, right? Recognizing that we had a discussion on Monday about this, right? That humans, not just Jews, right? All humans are wired to be wired to be connected with other humans, right? And one of the ways we do that is through shared stories, right? Through arguing about what really matters, right? And where do we have these conversations, / arguments? One of the Jewish places is in the Beit Midrash, right? About, well, how do we decide what's most important? How do we get there? How do we determine what's the most important thing, right? One of the ways we do that, right, is we get together with our fellow Jews, and often with people who aren't Jewish, right? And we have these conversations because it's very interesting to have that conversation with people who aren't Jewish, right? And figure out what's really most important. Go ahead, Phyllis.
Okay, I have two questions. Speaking of words, okay?
Yeah.
One, what does midrash mean?
So in the context of Beit Midrash, it means study. It means just the house of study, the place where you get together and you study Jewish things. As a sort of a literary genre, Midrash, it comes from the words drash, darash, which means to sort of push, right? You want to push on the text, right? You want to figure out what the text means. So you're going to push on it a bit, right? You're going to sort of, slap it around, make it tell you what it means, right? And so actually people get very upset sometimes when they read Midrash, right? Because they say there's no way that the text that the Midrash is discussing can possibly mean what the Midrash says it means, right? It's completely fanciful, right? It's off the wall, right? But that's one of the things that Midrash does, right? Is it pushes, right? So those are two at least senses of what Midrash is. There are others, of course. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the second one is, so the Hebrew is Gemai. And how do they get Gemara?
No, it's not Gamai. This is not a letter. That thing is called a chupchik, which means it is like it's the same as an apostrophe in the word it's, right? It's like it's an indication that there are letters left out. Yeah. So this word actually is Gemara, but it's very interesting how in Hebrew some of the abbreviations are, to me at least, completely inexplicable. Why did they abbreviate that, but not that?
How did you learn that? How do people know that it's a?
Just by practice, just by a teacher telling you that's what that is, right?
Also got the midrash before the Gemara in the Talmud.
Right, no, so if that's not midrash, that's Mishnah,
Mishnah.
Right.
Sorry about that.
no, and,
There's a Mishnah.
right, which is matnea, which is Aramaic for repetition. Mishnah means repetition. Mishnah means again, right, repetition, repeat, right? How do you learn things traditionally, right? By rote, you keep on repeating them, right? So that's what the Mishnah is. Gemara means study.
The other side, just, if it's Mishnah, is it because you need to repeat it to get the full meaning that you think is missing, or not completing your understanding, or blah, blah, blah?
No, I think it's just that it's just a.
Just.
I think it's just, I mean, I'm sure you could read all kinds of things into it, but the most.
Needs a repetition.
The most basic understanding is that that there are people who recite the Mishnah, right, because they can repeat it from memory, and the rest of us, you rely on the book or you rely on the people who can remember it, because who can remember all that stuff? Oh yeah, this guy over here can do it, right? Not the rest of us.
We lost about 3 or 4 of them in the show.
We lost a lot of people like that. All right. So what's the Gemara? So the sages taught in a Baraita. Okay, so what's a Baraita? Does anyone remember? We've come across this word before, but just to make it clear,
It's a teaching or something.
it's a teaching. Exactly. It's a teaching that's not in the Mishnah, right? So one of the issues, of course, with oral literature, right, is that there are all kinds of versions of the same traditions, right? And so the Mishnah is a collection of these traditions, right? But there are other ones that were not included in the Mishnah, right? And one of the things that the Gemara, as a commentary on the Mishnah, is doing is trying to fill out sometimes, like in this case, like, that's a really short prayer. I wonder what was really included in it. Or sometimes they'll have a tradition in a Baraita that contradicts the tradition that's in the Mishnah. So which the rabbis love, of course, because then it gives them an opportunity to figure out, what do we do with this contradictory tradition, right? One of the most favorite things for the rabbis to do is make sure that they both have some sort of relevance and what's the word I'm looking for? I apologize. Validity, that they are both valid, but in specific situations, right? So in this case, right, we have a Baraita that says, I have a fuller version of Nehuniah's prayer. Okay. So on his entrance, what does he say? It says, "May it be your will, Lord my God, that no mishap transpires caused by me." Right? That I don't make a mistake and cause other people to understand the tradition incorrectly. Right? Let me be a faithful steward of the tradition and not mess things up. Right? When we teach, right, we hope that we're going to do that too, right? God forbid I don't remember something the wrong way and send people away thinking something that is not consistent with the tradition, right? And that I not fail in any matter of halacha, right? That I will not be wrong, right? And that my colleagues will rejoice in me, right? That I will be a valued member of the Hevra, of the group, right? That this group will appreciate my participation. Right? He wants to belong. Go ahead, Naomi.
But if we are having a discussion with varying opinions, who decides which opinion does not mess up halacha, which opinion does, and we tend to keep dissenting opinions anyway.
Right.
Who decides whether you messed up or not?
Great question. Great, Fran, go ahead.
Well, just following what Naomi said, how can an opinion be wrong?
Yeah.
Well, if somebody doesn't present it as a fact,
Well,
as the particular way to truth,
right.
but a way of looking at something. How could that bring disgrace? How could that be an error? How could that be?
Well, that's an interesting question, but I mean, I would refer you, right? I would refer you to there's all kinds of things I could say about our current, political or national situation, right? About people who have opinions, right, that have suddenly led to, shall we say, the rapid spread of the Delta variant. Okay, so let's not go there, right? Let's look at the previous sugya, right? The previous portion of the Talmud that we've just finished studying, right? When Rabban Gamliel, right, was deposed, he was suddenly worried, right? Maybe my restrictive understanding of who should be admitted into the Beit Midrash kept Torah from people in Israel, right? Maybe my opinion, right? Which I mean, he's welcome to have his own opinion, but
he had
maybe
power as well.
right. And that's the issue, right? Is that if a wrong opinion combined with power, right, leads to a policy that's a mistake, right, then that leads to trouble, right? And it's so interesting, right, is because the Talmud in that case, just to remind you, right, has this great thing where he says, he's worried that maybe he messed up and he kept Torah from people in Israel. And then they send him a dream, right, assuring him that he was not wrong. Right? His self-justification, right, is so strong, right, that he doesn't worry about it for very long. Right? His ego is pretty strong. Let's put it that way. Go ahead.
A friend of mine is a retired Baptist minister, and she just yesterday said to me that she loves the Mishnah, the Talmud. She said, in my world, they just throw things out. Jews keep them.
Right. And there's the good part of it, right? That we Jews tend to be hoarders, right? We don't ever like to throw anything away, right? So our books get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and our libraries get bigger and bigger and bigger. Of course, you can't find anything, right? Because who knows where you put that, right? But it is true, right? There's this sort of impulse in Judaism to keep things around, even if they may not be right. All right. So, and then he specified, and that I will neither declare pure that which is impure, nor declare impure that which is pure, and that my colleagues will not fail in any matter of halacha. Right? I don't want to be proven better than they are. Right? I want to make sure that we're all sort of functioning at a high level. Right? And that I will rejoice in them. Right? It's a very sort of mutual, sort of idealized version of a study group, right? This is a little bit different than Rabban Gamliel saying, "Wait till he shows up, and I'm going to slice and dice him up." Obviously intellectually, not physically, but they, that sort of impulse on one hand, right, to sort of verbal combat, right, versus this sort of kinder and gentler kind of way, right, where the idea is that we support one another, so on and so forth. All right, great. And then, right, upon his exit, what did he say? He said, "I give thanks before you, Lord my God, that you have placed my lot among those who sit in the study hall, and have not given me my portion among those who sit idly on street corners." That I have the privilege, right, of being in this context of learners. I rise early and they rise early. I rise early to pursue matters of Torah, and they rise early to pursue frivolous matters. I toil and they toil. I toil and receive a reward, and they toil and do not receive a reward. I run and they run. I run to the life of the world to come, and they run to the pit of destruction. Let's just say that I don't appreciate this part of the prayer nearly as much as I appreciate the first part. So, what do you think?
Nothing's new under the sun.
Right. Yeah.
Well, it just crossed my mind that most history is that most of these rabbis also were engaged in, now this is where the question is in my mind, were engaged in work,
Right.
shoemakers, wood, whatever they did.
Right.
And I'm trying to understand how they make the leap from the real world of trying to make a living for their family or whatever at that time. There's a lot of unknowns here in this question.
Yeah.
And how this prayer comes about
Right.
when that specific time comes for them to focus on their godliness and holiness.
Right.
So what happened? I mean, in the real world, with some of their colleagues who weren't studying, didn't go sit like it says to do with Hillel and so on. Are those people who work for a living gone to a pit of destruction?
Good, great questions, Maury. Go ahead, Naomi.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say, I want a definition of the word toil.
Yes.
I toil and they toil.
Yeah.
We all toil, right?
You know, what are we talking about here?
Right. Ani amel, right? Kabel sachar vehem amelim ve'enam mikablim sachar. So I think both of you are pointing at something like what's the nature of the work that's happening here, right, versus the work that's happening elsewhere. And again, this is one of those things about the Talmud that I find so interesting, right? Is that we have this voice, right, that appears to be saying the work we do, the benighted we, sitting in the study hall that we do is worthy of reward, right? While the work that people are doing on street corners, tending shop or making making charcoal or whatever is somehow not worthy of reward, right? And this is coming directly right after the section, right, where we had the big fight between Rabban Gamliel, right, the rich guy who doesn't have to do anything but sit in the Beit Midrash all day, and Rabbi Yehoshua, right, who is working for his living, right, and actually scolds Rabban Gamliel, right, for not recognizing how hard the lives of Torah scholars are, right? Yeah, go ahead, Naomi, and then Phyllis.
Well, in some traditions, yes, the men stayed in the study house, but the women were the ones who went.
Yeah, this is probably a little early for that. Yeah.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right that this is one of those places, right? This is probably one of the texts, right, that the men who decided that was a good system probably relied on it. Oh, we need to sit in the study hall, right, and do the work that's worthy of reward. We'll let the ladies, right, do all that hard toil that's not worth any reward, right?
Shakespeare also called them the shop workers.
Yeah.
The shop workers.
Yeah. Go ahead, Phyllis.
Extending Naomi's comment. By the 19th century, the idealization of intellectual pursuits is total, and it's the women who do the toiling.
Right. And it's very interesting, right? Because there are, I've now read a couple of different books that talk, they're not about Judaism. They're about, good habits to have or ways to keep your mind sharp, right? And they talk about, what do they talk about? They talk about Talmud study, right? They say showing up at shul, showing up in the synagogue at 6 a.m, right, to study Talmud before you have your morning prayer, right, means that people who maybe didn't have any more than a yeshiva, quote unquote, or high school education, right, are just as mentally sharp as someone who has a PhD in, theoretical physics or something like this. This intellectual activity is actually really powerful as a way to keep your brain in top-notch shape, right? But the problem is, right, until just recently, the idea was that it was only for the men, right? Now, of course, we've learned that, oh, wait, women not only can do Talmud, but they're actually really good at it. So we better listen to them too. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to throw a monkey wrench, please don't take it as such. But the prayer that says, thank God I'm not a woman.
Yeah,
Yeah, and there's many angles we can come at that question, so I'm sure.
right.
But read that statement in terms of a line of thinking that's allowing or developing the opportunity for men to be the only ones. To be
You hit it, right? You hit it that there are certain mitzvahs, right, that according to the certain streams of our tradition, right, there are certain mitzvahs, certain commandments that from which women are exempt, right? But exemption is not a privilege in this case, right? The privilege is to be obligated to do it, right? And so if you're obligated to do certain things, right, that means you get to do them, right? And you get the prestige of doing them. And so this is one of the big arguments in more traditional forms of Judaism, right? Can a woman do a mitzvah that is not enjoined upon her, right? And if, does it count the same if she does it, even though it's not required of her, right? In the stream of Judaism in which I was educated, right, we've decided by and large, right, that all people can, because there's plenty of men, right, who have exempted themselves, right? So why can't we have women who have made themselves, obligated to do it, right? We can do that thing can go in both directions. But that's not all forms of Judaism, of course. Go ahead, Naomi.
I think the women's prayer is something like, thank you, God, for making me as you have, but it doesn't necessarily say make me inferior.
No. So that's right. That's extremely important to note that from an Orthodox traditional perspective, there's no hint from that perspective of inferiority, right? We may, from the outside, right, argue that the gentleman is protesting too much, right?
Yeah.
But taking them at their word, right? There's no sense that's an.
On the other hand, a Kaddish is supposed to be a boy child.
Yeah.
If a woman says Kaddish, it doesn't count as well.
Doesn't count, right? In
that tradition.
certain streams of Judaism, right? Yeah, exactly. All right. So very important, right? That there is this sort of sense, but I think what this is getting at, right, and the way I like to read this, right, is not as a sort of a sociological, I'm better than they are, right? But much more in the way, I have had the opportunity, right, to pursue this study, right, to really enrich my life, right, in a way that someone who doesn't choose to participate in this is missing out on, right? Which is not necessarily to say, right, that they don't get their own reward that I'm missing, right? But the specific reward that I'm interested in, I'm glad that I have it. I myself would never, I hope I wouldn't sort of have this sort of comparative prayer, like, oh, look at the poor schmuck over there who's not doing what I'm doing. That doesn't appeal to me. But, there are people who like to be on the inside and pay attention to the fact that those folks over there are not on the inside. Go ahead, Fran.
Is there not an old rabbinic instruction or belief statement that we are to see the spark of the divine in everyone? Well, if that is part of our heritage, then how could you think that the others enclosed are running to the pit of destruction? That I don't see how
Yeah.
that goes hand in hand.
Yeah. That's a really important question, Phyllis. Fran, and it is, and it actually, I think that I would defer a response to that question until we've had a chance to read more of this little sugya. Because I think that one of the things that this little piece of Talmud is actually really focused on, right, is not so much the Beit Midrash, right? The Mishnah, right, as we saw, the Mishnah talks about this prayer that the guy is going to say when he goes into the Beit Midrash and he comes out of the Beit Midrash. The Gemara, right, says, oh, wait, I have a Baraita, I have an outside tradition that's going to talk more about what the prayer is. And all of a sudden, the prayer that was originally just about, I'm so glad that I get to go into the Beit Midrash and that I came out of the Beit Midrash and I got to do Torah study. How awesome is that? Is all of a sudden transformed into this, I'm going to heaven and all these other people are not.
Yeah, right.
Whoa, where did that come from? Right? What is that all about? Right? So I think what I would say, and I don't, maybe we'll start it today, but we probably have to end in about 5 minutes, right? Is that, wait, this little piece of Gemara is actually not worried about the Beit Midrash particularly, right? It's not really worried about that. What is it worried about? It's worried about who goes to heaven and who doesn't. Wait, heaven? Where did that come from? Wait, who started talking about heaven? Right? Did the Jews even believe in heaven?
Radically not. It's all over the place.
It's all over the place, right? Who does definitely believe in heaven? Christians. Right? So the rabbis, right, they don't live in a vacuum. Right? They don't live in a vacuum. The rabbis of the Gemara who are putting this together, right, and who are selecting these various traditions to discuss in the Gemara, right, are living in where they have significant competition from Christians, right? One of the things that Christianity and not just Christianity, but other religious traditions bring, right, is this idea that obviously Deuteronomy was wrong. Right? If you live according to the rules, what's going to happen? Is everything going to be hunky-dory and everything's going to go perfectly well for you? No.
Not here.
Right? Things are still going to be terrible. Right? And so where are you going to get that reward for living your right life? You're going to get it after you die. Right? So so the Gemara hi Fran, how are you? So the Gemara has to engage at some level. This is, they don't have to, obviously, but this is my sense of it, is that they end up wanting to engage with these questions. How do you get to the world to come? And then if you're going to say, well, how do you get to the world to come? You are almost inevitably are going to deal with the question, well, how would you get to the opposite of the world to come? And what is the opposite of the world to come? Right? So here, what's the opposite? The opposite of the world to come is the pit of destruction. Oi, who knew we even had a pit of destruction in our tradition, right? I, for one, would be much happier without any pits of no pits at all, but certainly not pit of destruction. Yeah, go ahead.
Is that Sheol?
No, and that's what's really important. No, it's not Sheol, right? It is Liv'er Shachat, right? The air is like the cistern, right? The pool, right? It's like the mine. I don't know if it's a mine, but anyway, it's like, it's a hole. It's a hole. And Shachat is like a
Is Shoichet related to?
yeah, same idea.
Like what in here?
Shoichet, like slaughter,
Slaughter.
like slaughter.
Slaughter.
Yeah. It's not a good place. You don't want to go to the pit of destruction.
What about like when the subsequent the image of sending off the goat rather?
Oh, Azazel.
I mean,
You mean for Yom Kippur?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a separate thing.
I understand
Yeah.
it's separate, but it has a ring to me in my mind, because I bring things together. Some thoughts that are preceded. In the pit, that whether it's a physical animal or abstract idea.
Yeah, I mean, right, there's the problem of what do you do, how do you manage, right? The idea that if you don't live according to the commandments, is there punishment? And if there is punishment, what form does it take? Right? And if you see people who live as we do on a regular basis in our society, right? People who live and behave in ways that we that are not consistent, right? With either with religious traditions or with what we consider to be ethical lifestyles, and they seem to lead very comfortable lives, right? Then we imagine, okay, well, they're going to get it. They're going to get it after they die, right? And so, I mean, maybe these days, we like, the folks in the Talmud, right? They're beginning to realize that, Deuteronomic theology doesn't really seem to compute, right? And I think for a number of centuries, right, in the Western world, we've begun to sort of realize, not sure if we can make sense of this whole heaven and hell thing the same way we used to, right? So we're struggling to figure out what to do with it. So this is where the Gemara is at, right? And it gives us an opportunity to think about these questions, not to say that the Gemara is right and that there is a pit of destruction, right? And that the rest of us are going to go to the world to come, right? But to think about, well, what do we do, right? With these ideas, how do we think about what's going to for what are the reasons that we should behave in ways that we think are consistent, whether we want to be consistent with our tradition or we want to be consistent with our own conscience, right? Consistent with what we feel is our own ethics, right? What's the why should we bother? So anyway, so that is, I think, what we will get to, right? So we'll see, right, that what it says here, on a similar note, the Gemara recounts related stories with different approaches. Basically, these stories are all about, there's two rabbis who fall ill, and what do they say to their followers on their deathbeds about how they should live, what constitutes a blessing, so on and so forth. So next week, no, not next week. Next week we'll have a guest star. Rabbi Rachel will be here next week. I am going to accompany my son on his second driving test. So,
nice.
So please, whether you are a davener in shul or a meditator or just someone who sends positive vibes to the universe, please do that on behalf of my son. So Rabbi Rachel will be here next week. I don't know yet what she's planning to teach, but she will be, I'm sure she'll be announcing it. And then in 2 weeks, you will find out what Rabbi Eliezer has to say about what does it say here? Teach us the paths of life, right? And we will thereby merit the life in the world to come, right? How should we live so that we can get to? How can we live so we can get to heaven? And yeah, if you want, you can. If you're interested, these books hold this information. You're more than welcome to look at them, and we'll discuss them next week. But I mean,
I just saw prevent your children from watching.
Yes, right. We will get there. Right. That is actually a term of great dispute. You have to translate it one way or the other. One translation says logic. The other translation says meditation. Don't let your children meditate. Okay. I don't think they mean transcendental meditation. I don't think they mean Buddhism. But the point, what do they mean when they say that, is the big argument. We'll have an opportunity to. I mean, again, you can look it up in these books if you'd like.
What do they mean when they say meditate upon these words? Torah.
Right. Well, right. So, well, that's exactly. More. I'm not going to answer the question, but that is actually one that raises the question. What do we mean when we want people to study Torah if we tell them not to study Torah?
Is it the same word in Hebrew?
I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah. Vishinantam, right? Which is to repeat them.
That's,
Yeah.
Right.
One of the
Uh,
books, yeah.
I'm not,
Yeah.
that many.
These are two translations of this piece of
Where
Talmud.
do you keep them?
Right, down here, they're always on these shelves. Unless I grab them and put them in my office, not because I want to hide them, but just because I forgot to bring them back down after I was using them. But they're usually down here, and let me say that I'll put them up on the top right corner. Actually, I won't put them in the top right corner because people who are short won't be able to get them. So I'll put them over here in the middle. You see that pile of red books? There's two piles of red books.
Yeah.
I'll put them down there. So feel free to, but, and again, I have no objection to you, obviously, to you looking at them. Just remember that the real fun is in the discussion with other
As
people.
long as we don't meditate.
As long as you don't meditate, you'll be fine.
Or use logic.
Or definitely don't use logic either, because rabbis never use logic.
Yes.
How
And
about
let's
you
leave
drive
the
over?
books.
I'm a woman, I
If
don't
we're
do
reading the
logic.
books, we should read them right.
Yeah, they're always down here. I just have never, I just never learned
In
it.
in the real world of numerology,
I
whatever.
wanted to say.
You know, like, meditating, you have to
Where?
Yes, yes.
Where?
Actually, no, it's
Yeah.
I just read a book
Well, thank you.
that argues that the best way to meditate is to meditate with your eyes open. And she argues that you're meditating in order to be more fully in the world. And so why would you close your eyes and then have to open your eyes and figure out what's going on? So I don't know. Here, thank you. Great to see you. See you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you, Phyllis.
After a year and a half of not seeing anybody. Zoom is not the same. Anyway, take care.
Thank you, I'm
It's
flattered.
been new, so I think.
Oh, you guys are good. You guys did so well. And Ellen kept good company the whole time.
There was something I was studying.
Oh, they were great. Thank you, Naomi.
You're welcome.
So now there's, I think I'm gonna leave it up.
It was the whole
Thank you,
time.
Rochelle. See you
I don't know
soon.
under what circumstances, but it was a variety of.
And he had three.
All right, well, sit closer to me next time and I'll yell even louder.
And there were tears in his eyes.
Saturday downstairs, right in this room, exactly.
I would too. Anything with him, I'd go out.
All right, thanks, Marty.
Yeah, well, tell me your name and I'll call you if I see it. Jeannie. Jeannie, yeah, okay.
Ah,
What's the last
yes, I
name?
know, I know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, okay, I know. You're good. Oh, these guys are good. These guys.
I didn't even know they were here.
Oh, they certainly do, especially Puck, because he's got, thank you, Marjorie. See you soon.
Should I turn off the light?
Puck has half of
Get the light?
Rosie spends all of her time licking it. And so he's, he gets all matted. Because of the constant supply of saliva to his hair is not a good, it's not a good hair product. Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Great to see you.
Hey, kids. Hi.
Oh, it's just so nice to see Jeannie. Oh, yes, it is. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So nice. So oh, they're good. Oh, yes. You're both very.
See, this is how this.
Of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this is like St. Francis, right? It's just St. Francis just loves the animals, loves nature. No, but we do have a friend. We do, our St. Francis is very not going to press them.
I did not know that.
Yes, so.
Turn the light on or off?
Oh, it's fine the way it is. But yeah, look him up because he talks all the time about going out. Nature, you want to connect with some trees. Yeah, those up. Yeah, no, you definitely want to check it out because he, very, very clear, right? There's a whole tradition. All that's. One. Yeah, see,